Welcome in, everyone. This is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and today we're going to be talking about the idea of the Baltimore Ravens possibly trading out of the first round of the NFL draft and not taking a player with the 30th overall pick. Now, there are, of course, many considerations to take into account with a decision like this. With that in mind, I want to take a look at what I believe are the five biggest variables that would impact Eric DeCosta's decision on whether or not trading out of the first round is the right decision. 1. Is there a player we definitely want? 2. Could we get a great player while still trading back? 3. What teams could be potential suitors for our 30th pick and what would they give up? 4. How much does the fifth year option come into play with this decision? And 5. Could the Ravens actually move up for the right player? Now, I realize that number 5 is sort of the opposite of what this video is really about, but I feel like it's relevant to the topic, and I'm not doing an entire video on moving up in the draft. That being said, we have a lot to cover, so like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new, comment your thoughts below, and let's get to it. Let's get right into consideration number 1. Is there a player that we definitely want? There will be many great players available at 30, but are they day one starters? Any top 15 players that fall? Or would it be a reach depending on what position group they're in and how many have been taken ahead of them? Well, in order to answer these questions, we have to consider the position groups and players we believe the Ravens could target in the first round. The agreed upon position groups that the Ravens will be most interested in early in the draft are offensive line, cornerback, wide receiver, and edge. Now, let's go through some of the players that I believe the Ravens would absolutely take if they were to fall to the 30th spot. Disclaimer here, I do not think any of these players will be there at 30. I'm just saying I've seen some drafts where they have been. Offensive tackle J.C. Latham from Alabama, offensive tackle Troy Fautanu from Washington, edge Laiatu Latu from UCLA, cornerback Terrion Arnold from Alabama. Any of these players, in my mind, would be as little a question to take as when Kyle Hamilton fell to us. But as I stated, I don't think any of them will be there for us. Now, that does beg the question of, do the Ravens want who is there? I feel like this comes down to two main components, the player and the position. If it's someone like Tyler Guyton or Kool-Aid McKinstry, I would probably take them, but what happens if both are there? Now, that is obviously a question for EDC, not you or me, but it does make me wonder what the Ravens board really looks like. This first question is, I think, the most important because all the other questions go out the window if a player the Ravens like is there at 30 and they simply take him. Moving on to point number 2, where we ask, can we still get a great player after trading back? There may be, depending on what the Ravens draft board looks like, several players we want at 30. If another team is willing to give us more picks to move up, and we feel comfortable that at least one or more of the players we still want will be there a few picks later, I think EDC will be willing to trade down. We also have to consider that the player or players we want that are still available could be scooped up by the teams after us if we decide to trade back. That's the big gamble. So for this, let's take a look at not only the players we believe could be there at 30, but also how far back we can realistically drop in the draft to get a great player at great value. The players I believe the Ravens would be interested in or be willing to take at 30 that could be there are offensive tackle Amarius Mims from Georgia, offensive tackle Tyler Guyton, Oklahoma, offensive tackle Jordan Morgan, Arizona, interior offensive lineman Graham Barton from Duke, interior offensive lineman Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon, cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama, cornerback Cooper DeJean from Iowa, cornerback Ennis Rakestraw Jr. from Missouri, edge Chop Robinson, Penn State, edge Darius Robinson, Missouri, edge Chris Braswell, Alabama, wide receiver Adonai Mitchell from Texas, wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr., LSU, and wide receiver Keon Coleman, Florida State. Now, I listed a few options here for each position. The Ravens will most likely be considering for their first round pick, but not all these options will be there even a few picks later. For example, Mims, Guyton, Barton, McKinstry, DeJean, both Robinsons, and Thomas are about 50-50 on whether they're even there at 30, so it stands to reason that most won't be there later on. The real question here is how comfortable do the Ravens feel with not getting their first, second, or even third option with some position groups? Let's say hypothetically that the Ravens feel like they can get Jordan Morgan, but Cooper DeJean is available and higher on their draft board. Would the Ravens be willing to risk a trade to go back, say, 3 or 4 picks and hope that DeJean is still there? Or Morgan, for that matter? This is the part of the game where EDC and other GMs have to try and hide their true targets, lest other teams with similar needs learn about these targets and attempt to jump up in the draft and take them first. What this boils down to is where the Ravens have their favorite players on their big board. Again, hypothetically, let's say the Ravens really like cornerback Ennis Rakestraw a lot. They might feel safer trading back a few spots due to his average draft position or ADP being closer to 40. But let's move on and consider question 3. What are some teams that could potentially be suitors for our 30th pick, and what would they be willing to give up? The teams that I have circled for potential trade partners are the Carolina Panthers, the Washington Commanders, and the New England Patriots. Starting with 2 second-round picks at 33 and 39, the Panthers don't have a first-round pick in 2024, and if they don't trade up before the Ravens are on the clock, we could see one of the best trade back options right at the start of round 2. The Panthers' needs line up well with the Ravens, as they aren't going to be trading up for an offensive tackle or even a cornerback, most likely. They will most likely be moving up for an edge player like Darius Robinson if he's still there, or one of the top wide receivers on the board like Adonai Mitchell or even Brian Thomas Jr. The Commanders also present a possible trade back partner as a rebuilding team with needs at several positions, and in addition to having their second overall pick, they have 2 picks in the second round. Now, their second overall pick will probably land them either a quarterback or Marvin Harris Jr., but they also have pretty much back to back picks in the second round with 36 and 40, meaning trading up from 36 to 30 while still picking at 40 wouldn't hurt them too bad. The issue with the Commanders is that they may also be in the market for similar positions of interest that the Ravens have, like offensive tackle and cornerback. The Packers and the Texans both also have 2 picks in the second round, but are too far back, in my opinion, to be viable trade partner options at picks 41 and 42, respectively. The real risk with trading back, as I stated earlier, is trying to predict what other teams will take if you let them go ahead of you. Even trading back with the Panthers at 33 allows both the 49ers and the Chiefs to draft in front of you. The 49ers are often stated to be looking for cornerback, edge, and offensive tackle in some order, but that's a risky bet if you're the Ravens. The Chiefs seem almost always mocked with a wide receiver or defensive tackle, but offensive tackle is still a need for them and could mess the Ravens up if that's who they take in front of us. Moving out of the first round has other implications, such as our number 4 question: how much does the 5th-year option come into play when deciding a trade out of the first round? The 5th-year option has been a considerable benefit for teams like the Ravens many times. Having that extra year of team control helps with getting extensions done with players like Lamar Jackson and Ronnie Stanley, increasing a player's trade value like Hayden Hurst and Marquise Brown, or even as a way to allow a more raw player time to develop, such as Odafe Owe. Now, we don't know yet whether or not the Ravens will in fact pick up Owe's 5th-year option, but with his development starting to show more and more of his skills, the 5th-year option is at least a way for the Ravens to get another year of production out of him if they believe he will outplay his financial cap hit. Looking at the draft with this in mind, it starts to become a considerable factor, as not all positions are valued equally. Let's take a look at another Raven that is being considered for their 5th-year option, wide receiver Rashad Bateman. Now, according to overthecap.com, Bateman is in line for compensation for the basic 5th-year option, meaning he hasn't met the higher requirements of playtime, 1 Pro Bowl, or multiple Pro Bowls. The 5th-year option is based on an averaging of the yearly salaries of the 25th highest to 3rd highest in each position group. For Bateman, that means his 5th-year option comes out to $14,345,000. For another player, that could be different based on what requirements they met. Let's look at one of Bateman's peers who has a vastly different 5th-year option, wide receiver Jamar Chase. Chase has achieved the highest amount for his 5th-year option due to reaching the highest level of requirements, which is being named to multiple Pro Bowls, but not as an alternate, during his rookie contract. This makes his 5th-year option $21,816,000. Many people would consider the difference in production between these two players to be worth the $7,471,000 difference. But the difference becomes more important when you consider a player like wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr., who was selected by the Colts with the 34th overall pick in the second round of the 2020 draft. Pittman is a great receiver, and while I'm not comparing Chase versus Pittman from a production standpoint, I will do a comparison of their cap hit for 2025. As stated before, the 5th-year option for Chase in 2025 will be $21,816,000. For Pittman, it will be $23 million. Another example is the 4th-round pick selected 112th overall by the Lions in 2021, wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, we don't know what his projected salary will be after his rookie contract is up this year, but with Pittman getting $23 million in 2025, I think it's safe to say that the fifth-year option for St. Brown would have been a whole lot cheaper for the Lions come next year. Just to flesh this out a bit more, we're going to get one more example, but with a different position group, offensive tackle, specifically left tackle. The Chargers took left tackle Rashawn Slater 13th overall in the 2021 draft. His fifth-year option for 2025 is $19,040,000. Left tackle Orlando Brown Jr. just signed a 4-year, $64 million deal to be the Bengals left tackle. Now, if you include Slater's fifth-year option, his total 5-year rookie contract deal is worth $35,671,758. I'm not saying that finding a starting left tackle in the draft is easy, but it is a lot cheaper. For the Ravens in particular, if they're looking for a potential starting offensive tackle for their first pick in this year's draft, that fifth-year option may be too good to pass up in a trade which could bite them from a financial standpoint in years 2027 and 2028, which is right at the end of Lamar's contract. The final part to this is number 5, the thought of the Ravens potentially trading up. The Ravens are practically guaranteed to get the max number of compensatory picks for the 2025 draft, which is 4, based on how many talented players we lost in free agency. Does that fact, coupled with the 2 extra picks for this year in 113 in the 4th round and 228 in the 7th, cause EDC to become a little more comfortable with the idea of trading picks for a talented player that could fall within reach, and what could that cost us? We know EDC loves his draft picks, but he's also shown a willingness to give up some picks to go get a player he likes. Andrew Voorhees comes to mind, not a first rounder maybe, but still out of character for EDC. There aren't too many teams in what I would consider to be a reasonable range that the Ravens would be willing to move up to. The Packers at pick 25 could be a potential target, which if we are looking for an offensive tackle or cornerback, 5 picks could be a huge difference on who's available. Seems as though the Packers might be in the market for a safety or edge, and with Chop Robinson and Darius Robinson occasionally being available around 30, it might be worth it for them to take it. A trade-up partner I like even better, though, is Arizona. The Cardinals not only have the 4th overall pick, but they also have the 27th overall pick. The 4th pick will probably be a wide receiver for Kyler Murray, and unlike some of the other teams, the Cardinals are more in need of a starting guard than starting tackle, and in many of my mock drafts, either Graham Barton from Duke or Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon have still been available at 30 as well. Not to mention that the Bills may need an offensive tackle or cornerback, and at pick 28, that could be a problem for the Ravens, even though they do need wide receiver talent after the departure of Diggs and Davis. At pick 28, however, they aren't high enough in the draft to get a tier 1 wide receiver, but could then look to get one in the 2nd round and get an offensive tackle in the 1st round to protect Josh Allen, who will need more time in the pocket without his top 2 receiving weapons. As with anything draft related, we won't know if the correct decision is made until usually several years down the road, making a lot of this speculation simply a thought experiment. When originally coming up with this idea as a video topic, I didn't know if it was enough to make a full video out of, but as I dug deeper into other teams' needs, depth at the Ravens' positional needs, and how the 5th-year option can, at times, make or break a franchise, I realized how intrinsic all of these components are. I was reminded of a thought I often have when approaching a newer subject, which is, the deeper you delve into something you only have surface-level experience with, the more complex you will find it to be, making any new discoveries all that more rewarding. The fan in me hopes that the Ravens don't trade out of the 1st round, as it's always more exciting. But as I continue to learn more about how complex the off-the-field side of football is, the more I begin to truly appreciate the skill and abilities of someone like Eric DeCosta. Stay and pick at number 30. Trade back and out of the 1st round to pick up more draft capital. Bundle some extra picks together and move up for what could be a franchise player. What do you think the Ravens should do when round 1 starts on April 25th at 8 p.m.? We obviously have a lot of options, but will the decision we make be the right one for the team in 2024 and beyond? I appreciate you guys so much for checking out my videos during what is still my first year of creating content around the Baltimore Ravens, and if you know anybody who likes the Ravens, send them over to the channel. Please feel free to like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, comment your thoughts below, and as always, stay safe out there, and go Ravens.